kind of state of the state at the end of the year. The numbers aren't audited yet and fully closed, but just to give a sense, we don't have the treasurer here tonight, but just wanted to give you kind of a quick summary. A lot of this is information that you've heard in bits and pieces. It's things we've been talking about that drove the overall fiscal '24 budget. So before I hand it to Brian, I do want to say also that the yeoman's work he's done to just learn the budget, having come in March of last year and closed what was probably the most difficult budget we've had in many years. The amount of overage with certain things that Brian will talk about are things that we haven't seen in years and years. So my appreciation to Brian for coming in and learning it and trying to close that, as well as launching a fiscal '25 budget that kicked off a few months after you were here for the finalization of the fiscal '25 budget, and now learning the process as we kick off the fiscal '26 budget process, which we'll talk about tonight as well. So with that, I will hand it to Brian.
All right, thank you. I'll step through FY24 fairly quickly. I know we've beaten into the ground pretty much in the subcommittee meetings. But on the revenues, that was mostly in line with the projections for the budget. Medicaid was a little bit lower than we had budgeted, and that was really just more of a accounting issue we had where we booked 5 quarters in FY23, so we booked 3 quarters in FY24. So if we had timed that properly, we would have had about $50,000 more in revenue. On the Medicaid side, we had to book it on a cash basis as the state dictates. So we had three quarterly payments for FY24, which was less than ideal. The other one that jumps out, if you look at the report, is E&D transfer. It looks like that nothing's been done on that. That's a fund balance transfer. That's how it's supposed to be presented in the reports, but it gets picked up as we close the year. The intent is to take the $90,000 from E&D that gets certified by the state. So it looks like it's a deficit there, but that is actually working as designed. So if you looked at the bottom line, it should have been about $6,000 just below the projected revenue and not the $96,000.
As a reminder, a negative is positive and a positive is negative here on a revenue report.
That's correct.
So,
credit. That's a credit account. That's the accounting.
Yeah,
yes, exactly. I won't get into that, I promise. Expenditures was not pretty. I'm not going to go line by line on this. This is also the consolidated report, the 2 pages that you get instead of going literally every account by account. But one that jumped out that I did want to touch on, when you look through it, the jump out is legal services. That was overspent by over $30,000. There was, I believe, 2 different investigations that had happened earlier in the fiscal year of '24 that had obviously not been planned or intended, that we had to incur those expenses. Substitutes, we spent nearly $70,000 more than we had budgeted as well. That was a challenge just operationally throughout the school year too. Again, the last couple of months when I was on board here, I would see it and talking to the principals that it's a challenge for them to get people and try and also remain fiscally responsible while providing a level of education that's expected in the classroom. IT was $26,000 to the negative. That was largely due to a change in our E-rate reimbursement rate from what we had projected from the budget that had been in effect in mid FY24, which the rates weren't what we had expected. It came in a little bit lower. Part of that we have been working on to resolve, largely related to basically form collections on some of the stuff that you see for school lunch and services of that nature. It actually amazingly has an impact on what we get for E-rate, and we're keeping an eye on that. We're trying to be more proactive in making sure we have all the documentation in line. Maintenance of the building was the big one. That was $230,000 to the negative, and there was a lot of projects, we've talked about that both in finance subcommittee as well as facilities, is that there's ongoing issues that we need to remedy as soon as possible before it becomes a hazard, before it becomes an issue. At the end of last year, we had spent nearly $40,000 to remediate the issue with the tight tank. We had also incurred the $30,000 for the facility study that we're currently working on now. There was $26,000 invoice for a high school bathroom repair we hadn't planned on receiving. Then just throughout the year, through maintenance for the schools that we have in the other towns, We spent over $55,000 on just boiler work. We spent over $100,000 on HVAC work. We're trying to just keep an eye on this and trying to make sure that we do preventive maintenance so we're not paying larger and larger bills down the road for something that becomes an immediate issue. We want to stay on top of the fixed assets that we have in the building. Insurance, we spent over $100,000 more than we had budgeted. That's including both health insurance as well as our liability policies. That's largely due to the cost of health insurance, providing health care. And then the last one I want to touch on was out-of-district tuition, which is about $110,000 over budget too. That's a tough one to project as those costs come up throughout the year, and they're large chunks, and you have to run with that. So I don't know if we want any questions or any issues on FY24. Take that as a no.
I was going to say, just as a reminder, so you took a vote in June to transfer stabilization up to 400,000. So that negative 255,528 and 52 cents is what would be closed to stabilization, so that it wasn't the 400 that we had, right? We had hoped it wouldn't be. So it ended up being about 150 to the good, better than the worst case scenario we had projected. So just to make sure that connecting those dots.
Yep, and that dovetails with FY25 on the fall adjusted budget. We received $159,544 in Chapter 70 revenue that we had above and beyond what we had budgeted. And the intention was with the fall adjusted budget to use that, voted as an increase to the revenue on the bottom line, increase to the expense to then transfer that into the stabilization and offset to that extent against the $255,000 that we're moving from the prior year, just to mitigate the usage of the stabilization fund. So that's one of the three key pieces to look at on the adjusted budget that I want to just call to your attention, that I know we've mentioned before. We've discussed it in DCC, we've discussed it in finance subcommittees. With the increased aid, we want to use that proactively and put it right back into the stabilization fund. I guess the most important thing to note on that is it does not impact community assessments. It's simply a dollar for dollar increase, revenue to expense, and nothing's coming from the assessments. And with this, along with the $150,000 in the budget for FY25 for the stabilization, that'll bring the total amount in the stabilization up to about $1.7 million. The other two items that really jump out in the fall adjusted budget is really cleanup work. The first one relates to column movement. We had a larger figure than typical for column movement. I believe there was a contractual agreement with grandfathering CAG's licensure, so there was a push for getting your CAG certificate. We saw, I think it was 13 individuals received this. That impact was about $170,000 or so of the $235,000 in the budget for column movement that we're moving out. The other various column movements accounted for the $65,000. We're using all 235 to move from column movement to various salary accounts throughout the school district. The last one is salary adjustment. We have a budget of $150,000 to start the year in salary adjustment. We're looking to use $90,000 of it currently. This is largely cleanup. Some of it, if you look through it, is rounding. There's some accounts where we're just moving literally $2 or $3 just to clean that up and level it off, so we're not looking at annoying deficits of a couple dollars on each account. Some of them are more substantial, to hundreds or thousands of dollars, simply just to account for turnover, for new personnel, for other unexpected cleanup to line out the salaries. There was only one that was a larger chunk that was really for a new hire. We had it budgeted as just a general master's level degree. We have a master's plus 60 person with years of experience that took up more than we had expected. There's also just some small cleanup work. We went over in facility subcommittee to make sure that anyone that was getting charged to a specific account, such as school choice, we want to make sure they're charged there and not getting charged to the operating budget. So we want to make sure that that's all level and inconsistent with how it was projected from the voted budget for FY25.
Does anybody have any questions?
Questions, but I just want to make a couple of comments. One is that last year, there was a budget freeze that was put in place very early. So while the impact on the budget was significant, especially from issues with the building here in Byfield, that was mitigated in part by having the budget freeze, which was not a good situation for the rest of the operating budget. So I just want to kind of call out, I guess, that there was a lot of staff here who did more with less, simply based on the fact that we need to balance our budget and be able to cover as much of those costs as possible, and that's difficult for sure. And commend them for their work in that, even though there was no alternative at that point, right? We have to cover it at some point.
And if I can say, there's several positions that went unfilled. So not only was it doing more with less tangible supplies and materials, but there still remain several IAs that haven't been filled, which means those one-on-ones aren't receiving the support. So there's kind of all hands on deck, which makes specifically more work in the district-wide programs. So yeah, so there is a definite and definitive impact. As of today, there is no budget freeze, but that can change at any moment in time, right? I mean, it was around this time last year that things started happening, and we started to have, whether it's an out-of-district placement or what have you, but when they're measured in hundreds of thousands, we just don't have the reserves to offset those as we might have in the past. So.
Yeah, and I think the second thing I just want to mention is that for this year, Finance Subcommittee is already hearing about additional building issues that are coming down the pike. So this is not, that unfortunately was not a blip. I just want that to be on the committee's radar from kind of the continuum that we see in finance, since that doesn't end up in front of the full committee all the time, that we're going to be continuing to see some very expensive repairs happening here at this campus, and at some of the other ones, to be fair, but definitely here at this campus. And then the last thing I just wanted to say, even though I think everyone here knows it, but it just bears saying, that the decision to take the additional Chapter 70 that we're receiving this year and move it into stabilization, to build that back up, knowing that we're going to need that down the road for facilities issues, was something that was run by the District Communication Committee a couple of different times. So the select boards have seen it, the town finance committees have seen it. This isn't a surprise to anyone that this is the route that we've chosen to take, and they were on board with us making that transfer rather than essentially crediting that revenue elsewhere. It was something that they definitively supported. So it is essentially a net neutral to the towns, but it builds that back up so that we have those funds available for facilities issues.
And I was going to say that when we went through the process of creating that capital plan of funding stabilization and OPEB, spending capital improvement funds out of stabilization is seen differently by the credit rating agencies than pulling money out of excess and deficiency or any other places, rather than the stabilization account is there for that purpose. Of course, there are things that we've talked about at length that we want to be spending it on, but it is there for that purpose. So this allows us, rather than having it being filtered through to E&D at the end of this year, which would be accessible next year, this also allows us to have immediate access to it.
I make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2025 fall adjusted budget of $52,206,533, including both operating and capital debt costs, with a total operating expenditure of $51,943,239 and capital expenditure of $263,294, resulting in combined assessments to the communities of $41,296,953, with the remaining balance of $10,646,285 being funded by other state and local revenues.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those,
Can I just say, so that's legalese that has to be reported. The net effect is no change to member town assessments. Just bears saying one more time, or maybe twice. There are no changes to member town assessments.
all those in favor? The FY26 budget development, even though this year is just ramping up, we need to be planning for next year. Superintendent Brian Forget and Brian Perry, the Director of Finance and Operations, will open the discussion about FY26 budget development.
So for this evening, I just wanted to put out there, again, we've talked about it, but now coming down to scheduling the dates, we're going to go back to our traditional, we'll say, budget planning process. So each of the principals will come in and present their needs. Each of our departments, if you will, at the district level will present the needs. I remember there were years when the kind of cost of doing business in total was $1 million in new expenditures in the dream budgets were measured at the $3 million mark. I think that with given the year we're expecting, right, we currently have the bus bid is going live tomorrow. We can hope for positive news, but there's also the reality that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in increase. We're not negotiating any contracts, any large contracts this year, so we know our personnel costs roughly, but health insurance, we are negotiating that, and initial guidance from our provider is we can expect multiple years of double-digit increases as an industry trend. So we know, right, the reality is that's going to be a challenging budget year. Regardless, we have discussed, and we believe it's important that we give voice to and present to you what the needs are. I think the key question is the best way to present that. So we've historically scheduled this over 3 nights. That started years ago when we were presenting school improvement plans with budgets. Obviously, budgets alone is quicker. So when I was talking with the chair and vice chair, we were talking through, does it make sense to have 3 meetings that would be shorter? The night we historically done first night, the 3 elementary schools, and then middle school, high school athletics, and then the fifth night, nope. Then the third night is the district office departments, if you will, in general. So those meetings would likely be shorter in 3 consecutive nights, or we could combine the 5 schools on one night and then do all other departments a second night. That would be 2 nights in a row. The meetings would definitely be longer. I don't think it's like a school improvement marathon, a school improvement plan marathon, where each presentation tends to be 45 minutes. So I think that was one of my key questions is, are there any thoughts around other adjustments to the budget process, thoughts in general, and second, do we want to do that over 2 nights or 3 nights? And I think, right, there's even been discussion around the accessibility of doing those meetings remotely. I don't know that I have a strong opinion either way. I can see the argument that these are streamed live, so obviously people have access to them. We're not inviting involvement from the public. So, you could, right, via Zoom. So I think there's some argument to say that a Zoom meeting is more accessible to individuals. But that's also been something that's thrown out. We've gone back and forth over the years, so I wanted to discuss that as well, whether we're talking about in the room or via Zoom.
So open to any suggestions that people would like.
Can you just remind us of the timing? Just so that we, like in our heads, like
The timeline?
What target week are you looking at?
So we're looking at the teens. It is 17th, 18th, is that right? It is it's early. It's the 14th, 15th, 16th of January. I'm sorry, yes. So currently, the way we've calendared it is the 14th, 15th, and 16th. That's the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then we have a week of nothing. meetings. And then on Saturday, the 25th is the workshop. So we've historically had 3 nights of presentations. We go back, do some synthesizing, prioritizing, summarizing for you, give you that information midweek, the week of January 20th, and then on that Saturday is when we meet to start prioritizing what additions, reductions, shifts we want to focus on for the year. So the question would be, do we want to do 14, 15, 16 of January? Do we want to do 14, 15, 15, 16? I think it's definitely at least 2 nights, right? I don't think there's a one-night scenario.
So to recap, it would be 3 nights shorter meetings, 2 nights longer meetings, or if you would like, 2 nights and then a remote, or how you would like to do it.
Personally, I prefer 2 nights, rather stay longer and do it in 2.
I prefer less and longer. No, 2.
Fewer nights, longer meetings. I did mention, we've also started these historically at 6 o'clock rather than 7 o'clock. So we could do 3 shorter meetings starting at 7, if 7's better for everyone, or if 6 works. We can do, if we're starting at 6, I don't see either of those 2 nights going beyond 9. I'd be shocked if we were still here at 9. I think they're probably more like 2.5 hours. People are
Can I just
chuckling.
make a
They're all like,
suggestion
if
also that
Brian's
we
talking, then it's
can-
going to be all night.
Well, we know that.
Yes.
Suggest the Zoom, because there's a lot of people involved with this that would spend their entire day here in this building or coming from where their other building over to here without going home, that maybe potentially we should be doing it via Zoom so that they can at least go home and eat some dinner and not have to travel back to their house afterwards.
Anyone else?
I would just add to that point, like, what, if your thought is that we'll get more public participation via Zoom, I think the more people that see these, the better.
Yeah, I don't want to suggest, I think public participation is difficult, period.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can see both arguments. I don't know that we've had more involvement via Zoom. It's somehow more, for me, it's somehow more accessible seeing 12 faces on the screen discussing than watching. I don't love watching these meetings when it's like you're watching I don't know what the right term is there, right? You're watching the group rather than seeing individuals on the screen talking. So to that, I would say I feel like is a little more engaging for the end user. I'm a fan of in the room right now because I'm so done with Zoom. But I do see the value of that specifically for this. Either way, they're recorded. So I think it is. I think if we were to poll the leadership team, they'd probably be split as well. But I think it's a 50-50.
You have a preference? Nope.
So is that what we're working with? No other opinions?
So
There are so many opinions
some people
around this
had
table.
2 nights longer. I'm of the thing of at least 1 remote night to make it easier on people, especially when you have 3 nights or 2 nights, at least having 1 of them remote. But I'm okay if we have all 3 or all 2 remote as well.
I would say stick with the same format. My preference would be, right, to publicize it, hey, budget presentations are coming up. Here's the Zoom link for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or it's on in the library, and if you want to watch it via YouTube, here's the link for each night. I think you keep the same format for the presentations, would be my suggestion.
Meaning you either be here all 3 nights?
All 3 nights, or 2 nights if I'm hearing people like 2 longer nights. let's take it item at a time. Does 2 nights starting at 6 better than 3 nights? Or does it depend on whether it's via Zoom
Would
or in
people
the
like,
room?
would people like Zoom rather than being here? Is that easier on people?
Say before we decide a time, we should decide if it's going to be Zoom or in person, because 6 could be really tough to get here.
Yep, I'm going to say, yeah.
And then commit, like if it's 2 nights, that's 2 longer meetings, like 6 to 9:30. Some people might not be getting home until 10 p.m., depending on how in-depth some of the budgets are. And then starting at 7, if you do 3 nights. So before we decide time start, could we decide how it's presented? And I have no strong opinion
Yes.
either way, other than like, if it's 6 p.m., I would say Zoom might be easier just because of that, like, it's January, roads, commutes home get a little longer, a little tougher.
We had a weather update today. It's not going to get any snow this winter.
Why do you say these things out
I'm telling you, they
loud?
literally said like warm and rainy. Yeah.
I have no wood to knock on, but did you just say it out
No,
loud?
I'm actually trying to jinx us so we get some snow.
Okay, how many people are in favor of remote? Okay, so how many people would like 2 nights? How many people would like 3 nights? Well, some of you did not raise your hand.
We don't care.
Those are kind of 3 different questions, actually.
Either way, 2 or 3. I'm okay with it. I would rather go with whoever feels strongly about it. Question, I was answering it.
No, I want you to answer it, but you were the only one who answered.
There were a bunch of hands for.
For 2.
So you were saying you wanted 3 nights?
What do you want, Erin?
I'm okay with 2 or 3. I wanted, if someone felt strongly, I wanted to give them the opportunity to say 2 or 3.
I have no opinion either way, I just.
Okay, 2 nights it is.
2 nights, boom.
I'll make the decision. 2 nights, Zoom,
2 nights.
starting at 6 PM.
So I did 2 and 1 there.
So, oh geez. Which nights? Which nights are better, Monday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday?
It's currently Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Tuesday, Wednesday.
I
Tuesday, Wednesday, 6 to 9:30, remote.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay?
pick up your mic and just drop it.
Okay, the next item is the superintendent's report. The superintendent will now give his report.
Okay, one item that is not on the report before I get to that, but Mr. Kelly sent an email to staff and are going to notify families this week, so I want to make sure you're aware with more details to follow. We are not going to be doing midterms anymore. The three half days, right? It's 3 half days in January that were previously half days will be full days of school. And they're working on MyCap and those type of career opportunities. So they're trying to figure it out. Again, it's a work in progress, so I'll report back to you, but I didn't want you to see something and think, gosh, I had no idea about that. So I think it's a positive shift. There will still be final exams, but
Students are upset about that?
students are upset.
I said, were students upset about that?
Students are not aware that's happening this week.
So there is rumor.
Student council aware?
I was going to say, there is rumor out there that you are going that direction, but there's also rumor out there that there will still be midterms for some classes. Is it going to be an all or none, or what does this look like?
This is a school-based decision.
So the
They're-
teacher can't decide to still hold a midterm?
They are not able to, no. Correct. Yeah. So and it's also, right, this has been a discussion for 1.5 years, 2 years. This was, over COVID, they were playing with different options. So this isn't sudden, but the school did make the decision, so Patrick announced that today, that it would be this year, no midterms, More to come on what those days will look like, and I'll report that out to you. But that will be going out, that message will be going out to families this week and to students as well, larger discussion. So,
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Yes.
Is the middle school going to follow that as well, or are we going to incur 3 runs in the afternoon?
you incur 3 runs. So
That's thinking the same.
yeah, so the assumption now was that we did this the last time we did this, we still ran because those are parent conference days. So the students do leave half-day still, and so we would still use the half-day, and it would be, for those 3 days, we incur an extra run on those 3 days.
Okay, so middle school would have a half day.
Right.
High school would stay for the full day.
Correct.
And then elementaries would be full day. So we are running 3 full runs in the afternoon. Well, 1 mid-morning and 2 in the afternoon.
It ends up, the half-days are significantly cheaper than so we're not paying for 3 full runs.
Okay.
We're paying for the regular runs and the half-days, which I forget the amount, but it's basically what we're paying is just labor for those runs because the cost of the buses is assumed in the full-day runs.
Okay.
That makes sense?
All right. Thank you.
And I lost mine. All right, so on the actual report and things I did include, so we've been talking about the school quality measure surveys. I had reported to you that we would be implementing them this year. The plan is that we are going to administer those the week of February 3rd. I will begin messaging both about those as well as our work with the Portrait of a Learner out to the community at large, to families, to staff in the month of December. Continue that messaging into the month of January so that by the time we get to February 3rd, everyone knows full well why. So this will be a series of messages. Everyone knows why we're doing these administering the surveys, how they're connected to our work with the Portrait of a Learner, and then expecting, the way we'll do it is the family survey will go live on February 3rd. A link will be mailed to all parents and guardians. Students will be taking it at some point during the week of February 3rd. It will depend by grade level and what class, by school, where they fit that in, but students will be given the opportunity in school to take these surveys. And then all staff, we have a half day that Friday, so all staff will be taking that on the Friday half day. So it's a roughly 20 to 30 minute expected completion time for the survey. We have made the decision in discussion with UMass to begin at grade 4. They did create a primary level survey. The responses were smiley faces and frowns. They've tested it out. I would say the response is folks aren't loving it, including UMass, the way it played out. So they said that most people have settled in on 3rd or 4th grade. 4th grade seems to be the grade that most districts are starting with. They feel like that's a good, appropriate time to do that. So this will be administered all students, grade 4 through 12. Families getting the link live on February 3rd, staff taking it on Friday, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and students sometime that week of the 3rd. So more information to follow. Any questions on that? I did link, again, just to remind people, I did link the dashboard into the report. Our data will not be part of the MCIEA consortium dashboard, but our dashboard will look like that. So that same Qualtrics really high level and really thorough analysis of the data will be the dashboard we'll have. We'll have our own link to include on our website to share that information out publicly. Next page, just a quick update on the Portrait of a Learner. So we have our design team, and again, that's educators from all buildings, from all schools, administrators, principals from all schools. We have high school students involved. We spent the day together on October 22nd, a full day, and started to, or continuing to refine our characteristics of a learner and core competencies. We have a nebulous product right now that we're working with. We're going to be refining that, sharing that out internally with faculty and staff for feedback, some more tweaking before we share a draft of that publicly. I love the work. I don't know, Anna was involved in that day as well. I love the discussions around the table. It's so infrequent that we get to kind of put all of the restrictions of our education system on the shelf and talk about what we just genuinely want for our students, our hopes and dreams about a learner and how they learn best, and what we want as a product for our students. To be clear, right, it's hard to get people out of the mindset of, well, we can't do that, right? So this is about visioning what we want for our students, and we then use that to measure our actions, to measure our decisions about whether implementing curriculum or process or pedagogy or whatever it is. This will be the measure to say, how does this stack up against what we have said as a priority above all we want and envision for our students. So exciting work. I'm excited to have that product as we move along in the months ahead. Bus bid update, I did mention to you that the bid will be going live tomorrow. It's in the Central Register. Brian, the royal we, will pass those bid specs off to as many people as possible. And then obviously anyone who reaches out to get the bid specs. It will pre-bid meeting next Friday, right? I'm sorry, next Thursday. So bid specs available tomorrow, the 14th. Pre-bid meeting Thursday, the 21st. Go the week of Thanksgiving, and then the following week is when the bid opening will be. And just as a reminder for folks, under Chapter 30B, we are very restricted. It's a very prescribed process. We literally, at 10 a.m., close the door, and anyone who's in the room with their papers gets to present them. I should say that. They don't have to be in the room. Their papers have to be received by that 10 a.m. deadline. And unless there's something that disqualifies a vendor, we have to go with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Responsive means they adhered to the bid specs and bid accordingly. Responsible being that they have a proven track record. That is not real clear and scientific in how that's measured, but I've done some digging about what a responsible bidder is to be prepared. District Arts Day, this is literally in its infancy, so it's not a District Arts Festival. That was far more extensive, but the art teachers were together on the last half day and wanted to do something, and we've talked a lot about bringing the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders over. I know we brought students over for the play and the musical in the past. It's just such a positive experience to have the students on this campus. So the vision is an arts day. The visual arts is in flux about what that will look like. Performing arts. Students will come over, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, roughly 9:30 in the morning, participate, listen to student performances, then work in workshop groups, have lunch, continue with those workshop groups. Each student would participate in 2 to 3 workshops, return back to their school by 1:30-ish, right, because then the buses are on the road. Those buses are on the road to come back and pick up the middle school, high schoolers for 2:15 or 2:13. So again, I'll share more with you as it materializes, but this was kind of just a late-breaking, something they wanted to pull off this year when they last met. Super excited about that. School safety update, just to make you aware, right, we do a lot to speak about safety and our all hazards planning. We had the opportunity to participate in a live fire event, which is my first time. And it was nauseatingly real at times, and then other times incredibly informative. So I had the opportunity to be a victim, kind of the academic incident commander, and then just an observer. When I was a victim, I had to be carried out, which was Sergeant Hunter was there and sent pictures. Appreciate that. Super fun. But it was just, I'm hopeful we can do this more. This was produced or put on by NERAC, because to go through an entire incident from shots fired with actual live blanks, to hear that and go through the entire process, it's ridiculous that we have to do this, but I'm so thankful for our partnership with law enforcement, because we have incredible police departments that work with us as the largest employer in the area, as the largest, in most cases, the largest group of humans are in schools. And so we are a real threat. And so I think that's important. to do that training. So just to make you aware that that training has gone on and will continue hopefully in the future. And then finally, last but not least, dear question 2. So as I mentioned here, this question 2, which is obviously MCAS, and tying it to the graduation requirement, the competency determination, has been in the works for 2 years. It was not news. We had received no guidance from the Department of Ed. And I will say, right, there's many things I will give the department credit lately as they've been attempting. I think this was a huge failure because, again, this was well-known, and to not have 2 information packets ready to go, I can't come up with an idea of a reason of why that would be the case. But they are in a very reactive stance now, came out with this memorandum that has some Q&As in several areas where it says, further guidance to be determined. But the law goes into effect 30 days. It was not statute, so unless the legislature acts, as of December 5th, 2024, MCAS, passing of the MCAS is no longer a requirement for graduation in Massachusetts. We had a commissioner's call the other day, questions like, well, could a school district decide to still use the MCAS as a graduation requirement? What does that mean for the students of this year? I mean, literally, even the timing, MCAS makeups this year were the 6th and 7th. So the day after the vote, students are sitting there, and there are many districts who said, yeah, don't bother doing it, kiddos. We took the approach and said, no, like if this falls apart, we don't want to be the ones to have told the student, don't worry about it when they need to worry about it. So our kids were great, all students were great, those that were signed up for it, participated, took it. But it is certainly it is to be determined. I feel good about our graduation requirements here in the district. I think they're comprehensive. Could they be tweaked? Of course. I'm not I believe there needs to be a statewide standard. I like the concept of an assessment. I think we've talked about this. I don't believe the MCAS is the right thing. I don't believe it's the right test nor the right time and place. It doesn't measure what it intends to measure. So if we're talking about performance-based assessments or things like that, absolutely we should standardize that and have that across the Commonwealth. But for now, it is a big black hole. As I said, our students who were assigned or are scheduled to take that, until we're told otherwise, we're staying the course and encouraging students. Obviously, if they refuse to take it, that's a different discussion. But we are, until we hear otherwise, encouraging our students proceeding as normal to have those students take it. And we will go from there. Is there anything I missed on that, Anna, other than my strong opinions? Okay, cool.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian? Can I have a motion to receive and file the superintendent's report for November 2024?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is the policy section D edits. The Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee has a schedule for reviewing subsections of the policy handbook. Tonight, they brought recommended edits for section D. Can I have a motion to approve edits to the policy manual, section D, as presented as a first reading?
I'll make the motion.
Can I make motion to approve policy section D as presented,
As a first reading?
as a first read?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is subcommittee reports, policy and advocacy. Paul Goldner.
We met earlier today and continued our policy review working through section E. Got about halfway through that, so we will see that coming through probably in January. Right now, that's all we're working on. We will meet again in December, December 11th at 5:30, continue working on that policy.
Thank you, Paul. Finance, Paul Mayette.
I think the key points were covered earlier by Narissa in talking about the rationale behind the decision on the Chapter 70 money, and by Brian in talking about going back to the new format for the budget for this year. We meet again on the 21st.
Thank Thank you, Paul. Personnel negotiations, Matthew Landers.
We met on November 1st to discuss Brian's contract, and we're meeting again on Monday to discuss the healthcare.
Thank you. The next item is executive session. The committee will go into executive session for the purpose of conducting negotiations with non-union personnel, the superintendent, to return to open session. Can I have a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of conducting negotiations with non-union personnel, the superintendent, to return to open session?
I'll make the motion to go into executive session for the purpose of conducting negotiations with non-union personnel, the superintendent, to return to open session.
Second?
We'll have a roll call vote. Paul Lees?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes?
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well.